Welcome back to the Uncontested Podcast. My name is Chelsea Peace. I'm a transformational life coach, and I'm here with Stacy Geiger, family law attorney. And this is the podcast where we talk everything high conflict divorce and custody battles and the emotional turmoil that you have to overcome within yourself to choose the new life that this is offering you. This week, we want to talk about the situations where you don't always get 50-50 custody and how relocation after your separation can affect your parenting plan and the new dynamic in places where we find ourselves getting stuck in these type of high conflict divorces. So we're going to toss it over to Stacy and ask her, so Stacy, what do you typically see play out in these situations where divorce is happening and maybe parent B got a new job and they're moving to a new place? Like, what do you typically see play out here?
So it's interesting. There's two different ways that this can happen, right? So at least as far as in Florida, you cannot relocate outside of a 50-mile radius without court approval.
Okay.
Unless both parties agree. So there are certainly some cases where one parent, see ya, peace out, have a great time.
Sounds familiar.
I don't need you in this area, right? You know, like our life is going to be a lot easier if you're not here every single day. So go. But then there's other situations where they're living in the same town and now one parent wants to move but wants to have almost as much time sharing as they're currently exercising, if that is a 50-50. And how's that going to play out?
Right.
You know, and we even call, it's not relocation, like I said, if it's under 50 miles, but there are people who push it to the limit at 49, and there's no way to make that a 50-50 time sharing. So there's so many different aspects of this. But I think probably we should just focus on, you know, the far away ones when they do move out and how that really does affect kids, because it does. There is no opportunity to do a 50-50 unless you are homeschooling a child. Almost, you know, a 50-50 relocation is almost never going to happen.
Yeah.
Because you have to be, like I said, you have to homeschool a kid, and you're saying that parent A is going to homeschool half the year, parent B will homeschool half the year, and the child's going back and forth.
Right.
Which is crazy.
And then we incorporate the pride of the divorce happening, right? And I deserve to have my kids half the time, but unfortunately you live 6 hours away or a plane ride away. And how do we make 50-50 work? Like, one parent is typically saying, I deserve half the time. And the other parent is like, there's no way you're going to get 50% of the time because I'm definitely going to be carrying more of the load. I know that's what happened in my situation. Emotionally, I'm over here like, can't you just show up more? Can't you just pick up the phone more? Can't you just take a weekend off? And in his mind, he's like, I'm making it fit where I can. And it took us going to like a parenting counselor for us to just get it all out and say the ugly thing in the room is that we both had different expectations of what long distance parenting would look like. And once we named it and said it out loud and it set expectations with each other of how to show up, it was like, we could have just done that the whole time. We could have just said, like, that's it. But that's not always that easy.
Right.
Right.
One parent's parenting out of convenience. You know, the person who moved away, we're all going to immediately assume that they are not putting their kids first. It's black and white, right? I mean, if you pick up and leave your children, the obvious response by everyone is, how could they possibly do that? Clearly, they don't deserve their kids half the time, or even a majority of the time. Because when we look at these long distance parenting plans, you're looking at the majority of the summer. So the person who is stuck at home, not stuck, but who remains in that marital home or that location where the kids are, their school district, now loses their kid or kids for the majority of the summer, which is, for the most part, your bonding time, right? Because they're not in school every day, and that's the time you want to keep. And now you're looking at a piece of paper that says, I might have to give up 6-8 weeks of my summer.
Right.
And I won't see my kids. And that's a big gap of time versus a local 50-50 where you're getting your kids back and forth every other week. They're now going to kind of sleepaway camp.
Right. And you don't know what you don't know what their routine is going to look like in that new place. You don't know how they're going to care for your kids. Like, I know for me, I was like, you've kind of been a stranger here
Mm-hmm.
in our day-to-day lives for the past 18 months, and now all of a sudden you want 6 weeks of time sharing. Like, for me, that was really hard for me to let go of that control that I had, and that, like, oh, this is something that I'm gonna have to come to terms with. But you said something on a previous episode. It's like, where there's, if we can, the faster we can get to the idea of, like, at the end of the day, we're gonna have to come up with something that works, or the judge is gonna come up with something that
Right.
works. Right? Where do you typically see parents, like, stalling the divorce process, where we could be bending on some things, or we could be giving the other party some grace and really just kind of getting to the end of a parenting plan as far as what would mutually work for the kids and them?
So there's ways for this to happen, right?
Yeah.
I mean, on one hand, the parent who's not exercising time,
Yeah.
the longer that time progresses in a divorce, the more likely you're going to turn around and say, what were you doing all these months?
Yeah.
Like you didn't exercise time. It was available to you this weekend. I think you're familiar with this story.
I am.
This weekend, you didn't show up.
Mm-hmm.
So that benefits the party that is showing up.
Mm-hmm.
To cut down that time and get to a finish line, there's always the option of saying, okay, so this would make sense on paper if you're going to be a parent that is going to show up. And if you're that parent that has moved for whatever reason and you're saying, I want to see my kids, then your option is to look at long distance time sharing. They're guidelines. Guidelines aren't set in stone, but to say, okay, so this says I can take every 3-day weekend. I can come down maybe every other weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And I can take the majority of the summer.
And actively do it
While
you're pursuing it.
Right. So the parent that does not want that to happen has to eat that apple if they want to get to the finish line sooner. The safety net kind of is to know, in a lot of cases, that parent's not going to do it. So,
And that's the pattern that you see.
right.
Right? What about the exception to the pattern? Is there an exception to the pattern? Do you see that?
Can you make one parent a better parent?
No, not that. I mean, have you ever seen the actual thing, like the thing that we all see them claim in court? Where it's
Well,
like,
that's what I'm saying. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying is because, and I believe it. You said it to me too. You want the other parent to step up.
mm-hmm.
Everybody does, right? You want another mom to be a better mom. You want another dad to be a better dad. Everybody wants their kids to have two really good parents.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. If they're not stepping up now and you think, okay, maybe at the end of this divorce, maybe it'll get better, because there's now time sharing in place that they're supposed to follow. The
Yeah.
judge has stamped that thing and said, here are your days. Go.
Yes.
Some no.
So I think
Not often.
Not often,
Not
which
often.
is kind of comforting, I would say, because I was on the receiving end of that, trying to say that I was keeping the kids. I did a really good job of documenting facts and dates and screenshots and staying very neutral about what was happening to me. But it is kind of nice to know that is proven on a regular basis. But I guess what I'm thinking of is emotionally, because you're looking at it from the legal perspective.
Mhm.
I'm looking at it from an emotional perspective because that's what I help people with. And sometimes people who, when you're separated and you do have a divorce, maybe it's post-divorce, you've got a 50-50 parenting plan in place, and then you get a promotion. Because this was a conversation that my ex and I had. I was like, what if I get promoted and I get to go be the director of the Colorado Rockies? And now I want to relocate. What would parenting look like for us, right? I would feel guilty as a mom if I had to make a decision that would keep me from my kids. You know what I'm saying? Are you picking up what I'm putting down?
Mhm.
Like, I would be apprehensive of starting a new life that could better me because I'm worried about not having that 50-50 that I had, when I could find what does being a good parent at a long distance look like. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I just had this conversation recently. So somebody was asking and they said, if we agree to this and I do get an offer somewhere else, what do I do?
Right.
And I said, that's up to you. I mean, if the other party is willing to agree to let you move, then you can move and you can move with your kids. And maybe it's a better place for your kids. I don't know. Maybe Colorado, they would like it more. Maybe, the other
Mhm.
side of Florida or the Keys, maybe it is a better place for them to live.
Yeah.
Maybe there are better schools in place. But if you're doing it selfishly, then it becomes what's more important to you.
Yeah.
But I don't think that the parent who winds up getting the kids 80% of the time is the parent who's ever going to question that. At least, you know, from what I've seen,
Yeah.
right?
No, I get it. I get it.
We don't have many parents who say, I exercise 80% of my time sharing with my kids, and now I have this huge opportunity. I'm thinking about leaving them. It just doesn't,
Yeah. Yeah. I get it.
because your priorities are here. Now, when they're in college, I'm sure that'll be different,
Mhm.
right? All of a sudden you get to live and on your end, and we have focused on when you are time sharing, during your off time with the kids, absolutely prioritize yourself.
Yeah.
And there should be some sort of balance when you do have the kids the majority of the time, but to make time for you. And you've made that clear. And I think
Yeah.
that's healthy. But, you know,
I guess where I guess I'm trying to share from a place of is from the aftermath, right? I got the black and white parenting plan that I asked for. I got the boundaries. I got the dedicated. I know when he's going to show up
or
should show up,
should.
and it's on him. We talked about that on a previous episode too. I can't control what he does with the parenting plan that we were given, but he has one now and he can follow it and he can show up how he wants to. And internally, it made me feel comfortable that now I have a parenting plan. But also, I'm noticing he's stepping up more and being more interactive, even more than the parenting plan now that it's in place. So I guess it's the getting to the point of we're not arguing anymore. Like we're both just choosing happiness in our own ways and showing up for the kids the best way possible, no matter what type of time sharing that we get. We're putting them first in our own ways. And that's what I want to hope. That's how I hope for out of every divorce. But I know that's not always the case. It's not always
You
the
do.
case.
You do. And who knows? You said, how often do I see it? It's not often. It's rarely in any high conflict divorce, because there's such anger that even after the divorce ends,
Yeah.
there's two parents who probably aren't going to make the best co-parents, right? It's always going to be bickering.
Mm-hmm.
But can it happen? For sure. I mean, there's a phenomenal couple, and I tell them all the time that they could be, the screenplay of how a divorce should play out.
Right.
He's a military parent. She was not. They they just drifted apart, but they have kids and they have family all living together. And he comes down. I mean, different state because military, and he keeps getting stationed. But he comes down and he spends time with his family, all of them.
Wow.
And they make phenomenal co-parents. Now, there was never a question of whether or not he was going to be an amazing dad, because he was. He just
Mm-hmm.
wasn't available. And I think that was part of what we were discussing.
Yeah.
It's not always bad to relocate. If you're never home anyway because of your job, then obviously it makes sense.
Right. Right. And I think that's kind of where I wanted to make sure that we're catering to both sides of it, because there is my hurt. I'm carrying 80% of the parenting load, but I wish you would just show up sometimes. And then now I got the black and white, and it's almost like a bare minimum. Like, this is the bare minimum you have to show up as a parent. That's what I got in my parenting plan. And I get to now come from a place of peace and observe the situation and say, look at him going above and beyond the bare minimum. I get to find gratitude for our parenting dynamic now because of what you were able to offer me with the boundaries. But again, that situation you're explaining there, like, you're still a good parent, even if you're far away, as long as you know what your standard of being a good parent looks like and you hold yourself to that in your new life, if it means you have to be further away from your family. And that's where, like, we were in trial together. We heard all the reasons why being far away is difficult.
Mhm.
But there were plenty of opportunities in the gaps where he could have showed up. And I think for those parents who are willing to show up in the gaps, it's okay to say that it's all right to relocate, because there will be a parenting plan that gives you the rights to your children, even if it's not always 50-50.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But again, we're currently in a situation where they are showing up.
Yeah.
It becomes an issue when they stop showing.
And that's what you have your parenting plan
Right.
for. And again, it's just going back to that documenting, be the boring, repetitive, easy to predict parent and be that for your kids. And then every time they show up, just say they showed up. When they didn't, they didn't. And then if someday somebody comes knocking and says, Stacy calls me and says, hey, they're filing for a motion to modify custody, I'm going, okay. But if after a year and a half of you showed up and did what you wanted and now you're saying you could do more and you've been doing more and you come back and you say like I want more time, I'll be a lot more likely to say like, yeah, you're right, you have been showing up differently. Let's discuss how you can get more time with them. And I think that goes back to it took a lot of work for me to get here.
It does.
Right? And
it does because people relocate for only a handful of reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to relocate for financial reasons,
Right.
which might happen. And people do. They pick up and leave and they say, my job, the same job I'm doing now can make triple on the other side of the country. And maybe my standard of living would be that much better and it's worth the travel to me. Okay. One of the obvious, the top reasons for divorce is you're relocating because of a paramour.
Mm-hmm.
You found somebody else and that's where high conflict really
That's
takes
where it comes
effect.
from, right?
Because now not only have they left the house and the family unit, but now they have moved out of another state. And relocation is different depending on how far away they've moved, right? Your situation is completely different than somebody who has moved cross country because there's a difference between a long distance drive and a long distance flight.
Yeah, absolutely.
How much do you want to put kids on an airplane a year?
Right.
And
And
then at
then
what point are they flying by themselves?
true. And then are you willing to sacrifice and you're the one who's doing the traveling and going to them if you did move from across the country, right? You know what I'm saying? If you
Mhm.
said if my income would triple and I would be in a place that brings me a lot of joy and happiness, I'd be closer to my family, my kids are in another state. I'm willing to sacrifice 1 or 2 of my weekends a month to fly to them and stay. It's all on what does the future look like where everybody's happy and you're putting the kids first, I think is just the biggest thing that you can always focus on when it comes to this high conflict situation. How can we put the kids first and put our prides aside? Because
Right.
again, the kids are watching. What we keep talking about, the kids are watching, they know what you're going through, and ultimately they deserve to just see their parents be the happiest versions of themselves.
Sure, and parenting plans are flexible in negotiations. I mean,
Mhm.
we always say that, and I've said it a million times, is I can put anything in writing and you guys can agree upon it. We can agree to anything that you want that makes sense for these kids, but I cannot guarantee what a judge will do.
Yeah, because you can come to a table with a mediator, and hopefully that mediator is really good and can talk sense into both of you and remind you. But I know I went to mediation for 6 hours and nothing came of it. Okay. Took,
Right.
yeah, it really did take getting in front of a judge, but it was that important to me to stand on that parenting plan that I was trying to prove I needed,
Right.
you
And
know,
in your case, the judge saw that.
right,
It was clear, right? After many hours, it was quite apparent.
right.
But in those situations where it might not be as obvious or as detailed and with
Hmm.
calendars, um, you can't guarantee what's going to happen inside of a courtroom. You never know,
No,
you know? So,
it's a
does it
gamble.
make sense if you are not 100% sure yourself? Um, then maybe you do. We craft a plan that makes sense for the kids, might give a little bit more than you're willing to give, but if it doesn't play out, you still have your kids. So at the end of the day, you
Yeah.
know, you have to figure out what's the most important. And I think that's how you can minimize the stress of a high conflict divorce is determining, am I willing to do this in order to cut off all these extra months?
Yeah.
But in your case, your kids are
I got 8 more
they were
years.
you had a lot of years and they're
Yeah.
a high priority. And that's why I think a lot of people have to figure out where their priorities lie
Hmm.
first. Is it I want to live in California and make triple what I can make on the other side of the country. And I can successfully, I believe, fly home or fly to my children 2, 3 times a month or a
once a
month
month, and I
for
FaceTime
multiple
them
days.
every night, right?
Right.
That was probably like my biggest ask is like, after COVID, didn't we all just realize that like we can use a screen to talk to the person? Like we can make a connection for free over these devices that we have glued to our hands all day. There's a lot to be said about maintaining a connection and being a presence in someone's life where you don't have to be in the room with them all the time. But if your parenting plan allows you to go see them more often, all day long. But I definitely feel like that was a big concern for me going into my divorce was, like, what if I do go pursue this big job and I relocate to Colorado? How would we do that? But I also think about it from the flip perspective because we're not just speaking to women all the time. Maybe you're not the custodial parent, and are you, holding yourself back from being able to provide for your kids in the best way possible by staying somewhere where you're not all the time? Just to say that you're in the vicinity of your kids. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So ultimately, uncontested at a whole is stop fighting the battle outside of you, start fighting the battle inside of you. And sometimes you're fighting a battle with someone for more time than you can't even use. Right? We're fighting for time with children that we can't see. And then we get to court and we get a parenting plan and we learn what the new normal looks like and we navigate that. And if it deviates, you document. If you're at that point in your separation where you're withholding yourself from pushing through this really difficult process of a divorce, because I'm pretty sure there are plenty of people out there holding on to really bad relationships because they're afraid of what it means for their parenting dynamic.
Yeah, that's a whole nother day's discussion.
Right? Because they
Right.
think like,
So many people stay married just because they're afraid to not be with their kids seven
right.
nights a week.
And I think that's kind of where I was wanting us to go today. And we touched on a lot of really good things, but that might be where we go next is how do you know when it is time to step into your office to set up a consultation? And sometimes that's setting up your consultation with me so you know that you deserve better.
Right?
Good plug.
Marriage ends one of two ways. You're either dying or you're divorcing. You pick.
Yeah, I only get one life. I
Right.
can hire you as many times as I need to. Beautiful. No, I was kidding. I don't want to do that. But yeah, you deserve to have a good life. And I think that's like the biggest thing that I want everybody to take away from our podcast is like, there's a beautiful life waiting for you on the other side of this. It sucks being in a high conflict divorce. It sucks being in a divorce at all. But when you just really start realizing where you're trying to maintain a grip of control on something that is completely outside of your control, or you're trying to maintain control in a dynamic that you're not going to have control over once this is all done with, like you can get out of this divorce and just go focus on what would make you happy sooner. But there's so many people that are like, I just don't want to let this thing go. And we stay in this really expensive
Right.
disagreement for a long time.
Just to wind up in maybe the same place or again, it depends.
It's all gonna end. At the end of the day, we're gonna get divorced. At the end of the day, we're gonna have a parenting plan. We're gonna separate our assets and we're gonna move on with our lives. How long do we want to sit here and argue about what's already happened? And how fast can we get to like, what do we get to do now?
Well, what I think is interesting is, and maybe you can say quickly if you had considered it,
Yeah.
is a lot of people don't know what divorce looks like,
Mm,
right? So they don't even have an idea of when I step in, oh, there's going to be a parenting. Oh,
yeah.
there's going to be a division of assets. I don't, we get calls all the time. I think I just get it all. I'm like, nope. So I think that that's a really good,
Yeah.
um,
I think that's a great topic too, because that's also why someone stays so long is because they're like, I really don't know how this is going to shake out.
mhm.
Like I'm paying all the bills, sending home all of my paychecks, taking care of this person, and I don't know what that number is going to look like when this is all said and done. So I'm afraid to pull the trigger. versus if they just sat down and got consultations from 2 or 3 attorneys and said, okay, this is what's going to happen based on your experience. Because that's one thing you offered was perspective. I've never gone through a divorce. You do this every day. And then we talked about that before too. Like you go to a surgeon, you're worried about anesthesia and the anesthesiologist are like, yo, you finna feel real good. Okay. Like it's not as bad and big and scary as we think it is. And it really is just a separation of assets and rules for what life looks like once y'all break up.
Right.
Once this is over. And the sooner we can just realize that, like, this is the only thing keeping you tied to this old timeline, and you have the complete autonomy to build what happiness looks like for you on the other side of this. And let's just figure out how to make this good for everybody. Cool, let's do it.
And I think that's what hopefully that's what this podcast is doing for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Like we center on these smaller topics so that you can hear, you can listen, you can learn about what can come up in a high conflict divorce, what you want to focus on, and maybe we'll hit on that topic. And if we don't, send us a message and we will.
Please send us a message. We want to hear more about what you guys want to talk about. What are you concerned about when it comes to getting a divorce? Or what's currently holding up your divorce? Or what do you want to gain out of your divorce? Like, tell us. I lived it, so you can't surprise me. She does this every day. So there's not a question that you could ask that would stump us. And I'm pretty sure if we were stumped, we'll find the answer for you or we'll come up with something to help you with it. But thank you again for coming to the Uncontested Podcast. We drop new episodes every single Saturday. We're talking about all things high conflict, divorce, and custody, and answering all of the questions you probably didn't even know you had whenever it came to separating yourself from your old life and building one that you actually love. So tune in next week and please be sure to let us know, what do you want us to talk about? We'll see you next time.